Don't touch that dial. You're tuned in to the Dread Podcast Network.
Welcome to Development Hell. For every horror movie that hits VOD, countless others end up DOA. Development Hell is the podcast dedicated to unearthing these cursed horror productions. We're going to find out what went wrong, and then decide if these titles still stand a shot at the green light. I am your host, Josh Corngut. I am the managing editor of Dread Central. I am also a filmmaker in Toronto, Canada. This podcast is a proud member of the Dread Podcast Network. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Development Hell. We are now on week 2 of our limited audio series, Stephen King Unseen. So on this 4-part series, we are unearthing canceled, lost, and troubled adaptations from the master of horror. Today is our 2nd episode, and we are getting lost in the woods as we uncover the unmade adaptations of his 1999 novel, The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. So joining us for this entire mini-series is podcaster and constant reader Rachel Reeves. So you definitely know her from her time on amazing podcasts like The Losers Club, Halloweenies, The Pod and the Pendulum, The Girls on the Boys, and you've definitely read her writing here at Dread Central. Rachel, can you reintroduce yourself to the Development Hell audience?
Hi, hello. It is I, Rachel Reeves, back again. And yeah, thank you for the incredible intro. As folks just heard, I am a podcasting addict. And I'm so grateful to add another podcast, Development Hell, to the resume and get to talk about Stephen King. So that's amazing. But yeah, I love Stephen King. I love podcasting. I love horror. And I love film music. And I write and talk about all of those things all the time. So that's me in a nutshell, I guess.
Okay. And before we get into it this week, and nobody listening to this is going to care about this at all, but Rachel has an amazing taste in music, aka similar to mine. And there's an album that just came out, and I have to talk to you about it, which is Brat by Charlie XCX. What do you think?
Oh, I have been loving it, and I'm so glad you brought this up because I've been thinking about you every time that I hit play. But no, I've been loving it. I always loved Charlie, but I am such a fan of this album, and it's been on repeat. Probably gonna definitely, most likely, 100%, no questions asked, be like on my top 10 for the year, I'm sure.
Okay, top 10. I'm angry. You mean top 3 easily? How dare you? But
well, it's only June, but like,
yeah,
yes,
yeah, it is June. Yeah, it's so good. I love it. I've been like a Charlie obsessive for like a decade now or something crazy, and it's good. And it's crazy that the world is like catching up. Does it feel like everybody's kind of finally figuring it out that she's amazing? And like,
well, yeah, you think about her history and how she's been doing this forever and everything that she's had to put up with, but she's just iconic to me in the way that she sticks to her guns. She paves her own way. She got tired of like some industry shit pretty early on in her career, I felt like, and was like, no, screw that. I'm gonna do what I want to do, and even if it's a little bit harder, who cares?
I love how intense it is. She put out like a deluxe version with like 3 extra songs. Have you heard that one yet?
Yeah, I saw it just like yesterday. Is that when it?
Yeah, I don't know, very recently. Yes. And there's one on it called Spring Breakers that I'm like very obsessed with. And she just opens it up with, and I keep singing it all the time. So, and
she's supposed to be in like the new, was it Faces of Death movie? She's supposed to be acting in. So I don't know where that project is. You can talk about that on Development Hell if you haven't already.
No, it's coming. I hear it's like really in the pipeline.
I will see it. I will see it just for that.
I cannot wait to see how bad she is at acting. So today we are talking about a very different topic from last week. We started with for some reason, we went big the first time around on the first episode with The Dark Tower, which is honestly kind of the opposite of what we're doing today. That was like a humongous world of 8 novels, just like a huge universe. And this time we're going inward. We're going like into one of King's shortest books, The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. Could be wrong, but I kind of feel like there are 2 types of King books. There's like the really big ones, and then there's the really small ones. And I mean that kind of both thematically and literally. And this is one of the small ones. Rachel, do you want to give us like a brief seminar on this book?
Yeah. You know what? King contains multitudes, and this is definitely, like you said, one of the smaller ones. And yeah, it's funny. You're right. It's either like these giant, massive 800-page like doorstops, or you've got kind of these easy breezy reads or like short stories. Obviously, he loves that, and I think that's what's so great. Like there's something for everybody. Whatever mood you're in, there's a King book for that. But I love this one because it does feel really singular in a lot of ways. So yeah, let's get into it. The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. It is a horror novel, and it was released on April 6th, 1999 by his publisher Scribner, and it's less than 250 pages, you guys. Like this is easy breezy, beautiful cover girl. And we were talking earlier because I've read this book a few times, and I listened to the audiobook. And so Anne Hesh reads the audiobook too. And it's just a lovely listen even if you're not wanting to read it, but just kind of listen to something pretty quickly. I think the whole thing is less than 6 hours. So highly suggest that. It's also kind of actually like a YA novel, which I think is interesting. It's great for adults too, but I definitely think it's safe and interesting and fabulous for younger readers. So if you've got a 10, 11, 12-year-old who's wanting to get into King, this might be a great entry point, I would say.
How many YA books do you think there are? Like, I bet we can count on one hand. Dragon for sure.
Yeah.
Kind of. And
there's like some short stories that are really goofy and like more like gross than like scary.
I've never read the Cycle of the Werewolf. Have you been on that one?
Yeah, Cycle of the Werewolf, I think, would be appropriate depending on the kid. Yeah. Parental standards. And I mean, obviously, a lot of kids get into King with The Shining or Pet Sematary, the iconic ones. But I don't know if I would. I'm thinking about my niece. Like, would I give her? And it's like, I don't know. Those are scary.
They're so scary.
But this one, it's not, it's scary. Don't get me wrong. But I think it's a bit milder in terms of like gore and the violence, that kind of stuff. It's more atmospheric. So if you're not familiar, so Girl Who Loves Tom Gordon is about a 9-year-old girl, and her name's Trisha, and she's hiking through the New England woods with her mother and her older brother. Her parents have recently separated, and the mom and the brother have been at odds, and they're fighting, and she gets annoyed, and she decides to take a little bathroom break, and she finds herself lost for days and days. And so, slowly her world kind of shifts, and reality and delusions start to blend, and she starts to hallucinate a little bit. She's a big baseball fan, big fan of a guy named Tom Gordon, if you didn't catch that from the title. And so she starts to think about him a lot. She listens to the baseball games. She also starts to, have visions of or become not terrorized, but tracked. She gets on the radar of a creature of some sorts in the woods who is called the God of the Lost. And this creature is kind of hunting those who lose their way and frightening them until they are emotionally ripe to devour, is what the synopsis says, because fear makes them taste better. Yeah. So very terrifying. And I love how ambiguous it is about, is this creature real? Is it all in her head? I don't know. You have to find out. As we said, so Trisha is the main protagonist, young girl. Pete is her older brother. He's 13. So, he's a brat, of course. Yeah. And dealing with shifting schools, kind of finding a new norm, just, angsty. And their mom, Quilla, which is such an interesting name.
Do I stan it? I think maybe I do.
I kind of love it, but I've never heard it.
It feels very like Harry Potter coded, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's true. So Quilla is the mom who loses her and obviously is frantic trying to find her. Yeah. Larry is their father and is very close to Trisha. She spends a lot of time thinking about their conversations, and well, both are parents, but I think the father pops up more frequently. And then Tom Gordon, of course, who is an actual real life player for the Red Sox. And that is who Trisha is both like, kind of early sexually attracted to, but also just kind of like an iconic figure in her life, celebrity figure. And then, of course, we have the God of the Lost, as we mentioned, presents kind of like a bear, but also, nothing in Stephen King is that simple. So there's some other stuff going on, some other creepy stuff involving wasps, which makes me shiver.
Okay.
And this book, yes, it's about a little girl lost in the woods, but it's also so much more than that. And I honestly, it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Like there's some really beautiful passages in this book. And, on the Losers Club, we have a section of all of our book episodes, and it's called Word Processor of the Gods. And that's just where we talk about like some of the really beautiful writing. And yeah, King can have his cheesy moments, but he can also obviously write some incredibly beautiful prose. And there's a lot of it in this book, a lot packed in, I think, to this little 250-page book. And it's really why I love it, because it's just these one sentences and these things that just hit really hard. And it's so easy to, I don't know, get into Trisha's head. And I love it.
Yeah.
And he explores some themes within this story of this 9-year-old girl in such a, I don't know, a way that only Stephen King can, And some of those themes definitely want to talk about, I guess, really quickly. He talks about, these sort of relationships between parents and their kids and what happens with divorce, but kind of looking at it from the kid's perspective and seeing it through Trisha's eyes and seeing how how she's seeing her brother and her mom at odds with each other all the time, and how just awful and understandable that can be. And also just the reality of being lost in the woods, that situation setting in and kind of having to come to grips with like, I'm not going to be saved. Like, I'm going to have to spend the night here. It's getting dark and I don't hear anybody and help is not coming.
No.
And what happens in those situations when all of a sudden you realize that I'm alone and I don't know what I'm going to do. And survival horror. I love survival horror, and you definitely get that here. Some actually really incredible survival horror. And then just self-doubt and how that impacts you, especially when you're in an unfamiliar situation. And I also just think innocence lost. What happens when you're, you may be a kid, but you're not a kid anymore because you've experienced something so brutal, so, traumatic. And all of a sudden you don't leave. She's not going to leave the forest the same way she entered, for sure.
Oh, that's so good, because it's innocent lost, like, kind of literally and figuratively in such a sad way.
Yeah.
I really like that. Something that really resonates for me thematically, is so many other authors would do the whole, like, imaginary character or the imaginary friend archetype poorly, but he does it so beautifully here there's almost 3 imaginary characters that sort of keep her company in the woods. We have Tom Gordon, who I guess at first, she's doing it consciously. She's imagining her hero with her consciously to sort of keep her going and to sort of help her survive. But I think as she becomes more dehydrated and exhausted, he does sort of start to appear a little bit more vividly and subconsciously. And that goes, I think, kind of the same for the antagonist, this really frightening monster character that you've touched base on called the God of the Lost, who's stalking her kind of like a bear or like some kind of large animal in the woods. And honestly, like, we don't know, maybe she really was being stalked by some kind of large creature, because she's talking kind of like throughout the book she has these moments of instinct where she feels like she's being watched. Kind of made me wonder. And then the third imaginary character is sort of her like dark self, like that little voice in your head that tells you to put your hand on the stove. It's like the inner saboteur, I guess. And it gets to be very disturbing in times, and really requires a lot of strength to overcome. It's a lot going on, and you're right, in 250 pages.
Some really heavy ideas presented in a way that still feels digestible, that still feels accessible, that still feels relatable. and it's still appropriate, I think, for a young adult reader without feeling completely dour and bleak.
Yeah.
I, you know, you still see bits of King's humor. You still have those elements. You still have moments when you're feeling hopeful. It never completely loses that hopefulness. And I think that that's so important in a story like this, especially a story involving a child. And I mean, as we go through the development history of this, I think that's definitely something I want to come back to again, because I have some questions about that and some of the people attached to it.
Interesting.
But it is something that I think that King balances really well. It never feels like it goes too far one way or the other, where you're just like, I am not comfortable with this. Like, we're always rooting for Trisha, and you want her to succeed so bad, and you get so invested. Yeah, you get so invested in this girl and her life, and even her friends. Like, she has a friend named Pepsi who
yeah.
who sounds incredible, and Pepsi's I love her. Can't wait to meet her.
I love it. Yeah, Pepsi. I love Pepsi. There's been other times in King books where someone's mask of reality or sanity slips and they do start to engage with ghosts. And the one that's really coming to mind is The Shining. And it's so interesting how when it happens in The Shining to a grown man, he succumbs, really, ultimately, in like its worst case scenario. But it happening here with just a little girl, she's so strong and she's so resilient, and she, spoiler alert, makes it through ultimately. And I think that's kind of cool. I can't think of any other examples off the top of my noggin, but those two kind of work.
I mean, I also think there's something to the fact that she is a child, and, when the mask of reality slips, she's only got so many life experience. She probably doesn't have any, like, deep regrets yet. She's not like...
See, it kind of helps, maybe.
Absolutely. She's not, it's not like she's looking back like Jack Torrance on like, who
I'd
even knows?
Within 10 minutes for sure. So, and I'm like not Jack Torrance age. Actually, I might be. Whatever. Moving on. How old was he?
I don't know, but I feel
he definitely was like that. I think I'm Homer Simpson's age, by the way. Anyway. I've got some questions for us, if that's okay with you.
Of course.
I want to talk about our first encounters with this book, because this was the first Stephen King book I ever read. I think I mentioned it last week. So it really does hold a special place in my heart. I remember we had a Scholastic book sale, I think grade 6 or something around that. And, it was all like baby nonsense books. And I remember even then kind of being horror obsessed and being kind of like disappointed with what was there. And then all of a sudden there was this book and I was like, oh my God, Stephen King. And because it was at Scholastic, I think I was just allowed to get it. And it definitely changed the trajectory of my little life, probably, I think. So yeah, first book I ever read. And then I listened to it now for the second time, I guess. And I don't know, it just feels very special to me creatively. Something about the woods setting too. Another Stephen King short story that I read very, very early, and I think because of that is one of my favorites still, is The Man in the Black Suit.
Okay.
Have you encountered that one yet?
I don't recall it, so probably not. Or if I do, it didn't stick with me for some reason.
It's in Everything's Eventual, the collection, and it involves a boy who's fishing in the woods, and he's approached by like a frightening man in a black suit who starts to tell him that his family is, going to die one by one, and that Happy Father's Day, and and then worse stuff, like, but it doesn't matter because he was going to devour him alive. And it's like this very short, very frightening gothic story. It's like the little boy lost in the woods story, and it really resonated with me. And I think in some ways I sort of see these, I don't know, siblings to each other, and I love them both, and I do really recommend it. But enough about me. What about you, Rachel? What was your first sort of encounter?
So I didn't read it when it first came out, and there was a period in my life, I call it like my black hole period, where I kind of fell away from like some horror and like Stephen King for a little while. And I feel like I came across this book and gave it a chance once I, pulled myself out of that black hole period and kind of refell in love with some things that I previously knew that I cared so much about. And I think I was initially kind of turned off by this just by its title. Because, like, I'm not a sports girly. So I was like, the girl who loved Tom Gordon, the girl with the baseball hat, like, I'm not interested.
That's fair. I get
Like,
that.
and I knew that he loved baseball, and obviously he's written about that before. And I literally judged the book by its cover, and that's a bad
Wait, are you
sin,
not
dear
supposed to do
reader.
that?
Well, sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes you miss out on awesome stories because you
No.
don't actually even read the synopsis for years.
What was the first cover you encountered for this one?
It's like the one which I feel like it's like an illustration, and it's, like a girl wearing a baseball hat, and so and then I was like, well, I don't care about
boring.
baseball. Yeah, boring.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear this story about a girl going to baseball games and like,
For
no,
sure.
thank
I
you.
didn't know who Tom Gordon was, thank God. I was like, to me, it was like a mysterious sentence title, and I was like, okay.
Yeah. But when I finally did read it, I loved it, and so this was my third time reading it, listening. I listened to the audiobook, like I mentioned, but it's my third time experiencing it. And it's always so wonderful. Like, I always find myself really just drawn into this world and really connecting with Trisha and just finding some of the passages so beautiful. Like, there's a phrase where he talks about, I wrote it down, just the world has teeth and it can bite you, anytime it wants. And just these really, like, he just always has a way of doing that. He can be talking about having just explosive diarrhea in the woods, and then he'll just drop like a beautiful line right after it, and it's
I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because the body horror is present here, and the descriptions of burning diarrhea are quite traumatic, because let's face it, we've all been there. So
you've been there after sucking down river water.
I was worried for her. I was like, no, I've seen enough Survivor to know you are not supposed to do that.
I know, and that's the thing too. Like, she is a child, so there's so many things where she's like, "Oh, I keep drinking it." Like, it's like, no, you're literally doing that. But she's a child, and so she's only has so much like intelligence and resources and knowledge to pull from, and so she absolutely does not make the right choices all the time. For
she's
sure.
a city kid too.
Yeah. So yeah, I've always loved this from day one, and I feel really ashamed that I judged it by that cover and didn't give it a chance, because I love survival horror, and that's absolutely what this is, 100%.
But you did get there 3 times.
I got there. Yeah, 3 times. 3 times a charm.
Where would you say it sort of fits into your overall fandom for King? Like, top percentile, bottom percentile, middle? Where does it land?
I mean, if I'm like splitting it down the middle, I do think it fits in the top. However, he's got a lot of bangers, so I'm not saying it's like top 10 or anything. And that's only because it's kind of a one and done, really self-contained, easy breezy novel. It's hard to compete with some of the big heavy hitters for sure.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things that I'm less of a fan of. Let's just say that.
I feel that. I think for me, it's so difficult with nostalgia glasses. Like, it's always the first album you listen to that's like your favorite. It's always the first book. So it's very difficult for me to know. But yeah, I love it. I've never read the pop-up book. I kind of, because it's a pop-up book, I'm like, okay. But now I kind of want to find
either. It sounds, I want to read it, and I want to see how scary it is, because I have 2 little nieces, and I love reading with them, but it's like, this might not be appropriate for a 4-year-old.
I want to find it. I remember coming out, and it being like a pop-up book. Okay, but at least it's some format of adaptation, because we have nothing else. But we're gonna get to that. My question for you is, what makes it scary? Like, and do you have any like standout moments that you found to be particularly frightening?
Yes, and it's because I have experienced something similar at one point that happens in this. So to me, it's scary, I think, mainly because just the idea of, being lost in the woods, and also being separated from your family, and thinking about being a child and that happening. I do think that that's an incredible fear to tap into, and one that's very easily imaginable. And just thinking about, like, what would I do? I don't know. I feel like I would do a lot worse than Trish in this situation. But there's a scene where she falls into a wasp nest. And that did happen to me as a child. I was at a church camp in the Sawtooth Mountains, and there was a log down by the river there. And, kids being kid, and I was probably about her age, honestly,
Mhm.
jumped on it, and it was a wasp nest, and all the wasps came out, and I was surrounded, and I could feel them in my ears and on my nose, and like just
No.
being surrounded by a massive thing of wasps and getting stung. I only got stung 9 times,
Oh my God, 9
which
times.
I think is like kind of crazy that it wasn't more, though, to be honest, because there was, it was a massive
I'm
wasp
sorry.
nest, and just that feeling will haunt me for all time. So when
Yeah.
that happens to her, I could very much relate, and it just is very visceral. And I feel like he describes it really well, and just the panic of that situation, and ugh, having stings all over is not fun. So
That's really
yes.
crazy. Would you kind of like, how's the phobia to this day for you? Like,
Oh, it's okay. I
yeah,
just, I'm not going to go jump on random logs in the forest. I
they
can tell
look
you that.
so gross too. That's another thing. There's something about the texture there that really like triggers some kind of phobia in me.
Yeah, no, thank you. Not a fan of the wasp.
Well, then, yeah. So this book must have been particularly effective because there are times where the antagonist is actually called, is it the wasp priest or something like that? They give him
Yeah.
another name because his face is literally just a bunch of wasps that kind of form the outline of a face, which is gross.
Very gross.
That must have been crazy for you the first time you read it.
Yeah, it is. And like it's easily like particularly relatable to me, I guess. So
Yeah.
I can very much see myself, and I've spent a decent amount of times camping, and like I did go to like some sort of like very controlled, very safe kind of survival camps where they taught you like skills, a little bit. But this was also as a child, so it was pretty basic. It was like, let's make biscuits in a Dutch oven over the fire. Like,
That's fun. I like that.
it's a
Were you raised
thing.
by a cult? You can tell me.
The Methodist Church.
Well, yeah, fair enough. That's crazy that you got to do some survival. Do you feel like you learned anything, like, or remember anything?
I mean, some very basic things. I learned enough to know, yeah, this is not for me. Not a fan as I've gotten older.
Oh my
But
God.
yeah, I live in
Yeah.
Idaho though, so it's all around us. So
Yeah.
I have had some camping experience.
I am such a city kid. I have never done that well in the woods. I love to connect with the woods and go that was a big part of my childhood, was like being in the woods, but not so much camping. Can I tell you my traumatic camping experience?
Oh, please.
I went to a weird Christian camp, even though I'm Jewish, and that's kind of not relevant. But the relevant part is we went on a overnight trip, and I remember I was this like chubby, anxious kid, and I remember talking to the nurse before I left, being like, "I really don't want to go," and she was like, so sweet. She was like, "No, you're gonna go. It's gonna be fine." So I go, and I remember we're canoeing, and we're canoeing up to this island. Everyone's already there except for me, the chubby one, and this like nerdy, skinny guy. And we finally get to the island, and I'm pulling up the canoe to the land, and this kid decides to like just jump into the water head first. And I look up, and he's emerged from the water. And I don't know if it's like more in my head than it was in real life, but I remember his head being like cracked open. Like I remember his head being
No.
really fucked up. And so the two counselors we were with took him away, like left us with like a 13-year-old, like the counselor in training, overnight in the woods by ourselves. And it was like the craziest like thunder fucking lightning storm of my life. Horrifying nightmare experience. I remember getting back to camp and the nurse coming up to me and being like, "I was thinking of you the whole time. I'm so sorry." And it was just this crazy experience. I'm really glad I got a chance to talk about that.
Oh my gosh,
Isn't that
yes.
nutty banunny?
Yes.
So the moral is you gotta check for rocks. Don't jump in. Look for rocks. And also go to theater camp. Like, what are you thinking? Have you ever been lost? Have you ever had like a scary in the woods experience?
Not lost in the woods. No, I've never been lost in the woods. I feel like my mom lost me in like a grocery store once.
Okay, well, we have to talk about that. right now.
Okay.
Let's hear about it.
There's times when I would, especially if I was being ornery, I'd be like,
Hmm.
no, and like run away or, and then very quickly regret it. And yeah, so there were moments like that, but I was always found within mere minutes.
Do you remember what it felt like to not like know where you were? Or is it
Oh,
her?
yeah.
you
No,
telling
it's awful. And like I feel like there, times where even if it was just like 30 seconds, I feel like if you're in a crowd, and
Yeah.
I've seen this happen to other kids too, and my heart just always breaks. Like a store I worked at or something, and you see a little kid that is just wandering around not paying attention, and all of a sudden they realize that they don't see anybody that they know, and just the absolute panic that shows
Yeah.
on their faces. And their mom could just be but not that far away, but they can't see it, and just that feeling always just breaks my heart.
Mhm.
And so I do feel like that's something that probably every kid has experienced at some point, even if it's, not a life-threatening situation and the whole thing is resolved, under a minute. It's just realizing that you don't know anybody and you don't know what to do, and just feeling that powerlessness. Oof. Like there's no age limitation on that, I feel like.
Yeah, and it's interesting how King then kind of weaponized it with this idea of there being an entity that sort of preys on the lost and like preys on their fear,
Yeah.
because like it's such an intimate experience, and like also nobody's there to see it, so we can't really argue that this thing doesn't exist.
I know. That is such an interesting thing about this story, is it's like it's never really confirmed 100%, but there's physical signs of it. But then again, maybe it is just her imagining everything, hallucinating everything. But also, woods are creepy, man. Woods are ancient. Woods are their own thing, and
You don't fuck with them.
the
Yeah.
untamed wilderness. Who knows what's out there, for sure.
And it's a specific kind of wilderness too. Like, I'm a Canadian girl, but I'd like to think that our woods are not so different from like the northeastern part of the US. And
Mhm.
it's like such a kind of like a beautiful specific environment,
It
And
is, but it's
yeah.
also like so terrifying. The fact that, I
Mhm.
mean,
It's
I
not
have
good.
a friend whose dad, and this was not that long ago, whose dad was a very experienced like outdoorsman, would go camping and hiking all the time, and he disappeared one time, and they never found him.
Jesus Christ.
And so like that happened. I mean, that happened to Julian Sands, right? The actor
Yes, it
from
did.
Warlock and everything. So it's just crazy to think in this day and age and the world we live in, it's so easy to forget like how ruthless and how brutal and how much of the world is still just completely cut off from technology, and something can happen and that's it, never to be seen again. Like it's
Never to be.
weird to think like that there's parts of the world that still exist like that. It's so
Kind of
easy to
comfort,
forget.
though, is it? Like, it's horrifying, but comforting that like humans, you know, we
We haven't
haven't.
destroyed everything
Yeah,
yet.
we haven't completely taken over.
There's still hope.
I remember reading Into the Wild, being really fucked up
Mm.
by that book,
Mhm.
and okay, I'm gonna be very uncool for a second. Do you or did you ever listen to My Favorite Murder?
I have not.
Okay, well, I'm still due for some reason, and I'm gonna say the most like freaky episode. It's just like the classic true crime podcast, and I would say the story that they covered that freaked me out the most is they covered the first known bear attack like killings in America, like the first time bears were on record killing people, and the first person account from those stories, and holy Christ, that stuff is really scary. It's horror. It's
Yes.
like truly horror movie energy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
The
so
world's a
bears are,
scary place. That's why
yeah,
we love horror, right? To experience it in a safe place.
yeah. I would agree with that. I want to talk about the God of the Lost a little bit, if you're okay with it. What's your interpretation of him? Do you think he could have been like a large animal stalking her? Like, what are the different options here?
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea that it is sort of like a forest spirit, because I think that there is so much of the world, like we were just kind of talking about, so much that we don't understand, and that there are really powerful forces at play, in some way or another. Kind of like in the story, how her dad, Trisha's dad, talks about like the sub-audible. Like there's something there. There's a force connecting. There's an energy connecting, and I I believe in that in a lot of ways. So it makes sense that there would be something like that out there. I mean, it's easy to also make an argument for the fact that it's all in her head, and it's kind of like her body and her mind, playing tricks on her, but also giving
Survival
her,
mechanism, maybe.
yeah, or in like the energy and the motivation that she needs to fight
Mm.
back. And sometimes it's easier to fight back against something than
Mhm.
just the situation itself. Like, that's too big, that's too massive. But
Oh,
if you've
yeah.
got something else that you can stand up to and put a face on it, even if it is
Personify.
just, yeah, like even if it is just wasps, like that's really
Mm.
powerful, because that seems more like I have a chance. I can do that. I can fight back against this creature. I can keep going.
Conquering.
I can
Yeah.
do one more day, because just I don't want to lose to that thing, rather than just, starvation and dehydration in
Yeah.
general. Like, that's terrifying. That's paralyzing.
You're right. It is so much bigger and unknowable. Just the idea of dying in the woods for no particular reason. Um, it's a really beautiful but frightening antagonist, and calling him the god of the woods kind of gave me these questions of is like is he really evil? Is this thing evil, or is it indifferent? Kind of like how the woods are. I guess that's kind of why they're scary, because they're just like indifferent to us in this Lovecraftian, ginormous way.
Yeah, I
But do
mean,
you think? Yeah,
it's like, it's nature, right? Like, it's nature is brutal,
yeah, man.
but it's just, that's what it is. It's survival of the fittest. That's
Ugh,
just,
that's not me.
lions and eating gazelles. That's just the circle of life. It's not evil. It's just what it has to do to survive. And I don't necessarily think it's evil. Yeah, it's a good question, but because it's not
She paints him as
attacking
evil,
her.
but
It's
because she's scared, right?
yeah.
Like a doe is going to find a bear evil when it's eating it alive and stuff, but
Hmm.
that doesn't make him evil.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dark force in the fact that it's dealing with like dark subject matter and dark situations, but I don't think its intent is necessarily. I don't know. It is pretty evil, because it talks about
He's
like
not nice.
how, like, oh, it tastes better. The fear makes it taste better.
Ew,
Like,
it's
that's
true.
pretty evil.
Yeah, that's evil, because that's the difference between just like eating something to survive and then being an evil human, like making frogwa. That's
Yes.
frogwa is evil. Eating a duck in the wilderness is not.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think maybe it is a little evil. I think it is a little evil.
Although frogwa is delicious. Yeah, he's not. He's not so nice. We've talked about it a little bit. Paint me a picture. What does this dude look like?
I kind of, it's interesting. Once I saw Annihilation,
Oh yeah.
I kind of
Oh
have
yeah.
always pictured it like somewhat like the Annihilation Bear with wasps
Cool.
all over its face. And I feel like that's a good sort of representation of it. Or
Oh
even
my god.
something like the movie The Ritual a little bit, where it's
Mm-hmm.
just some sort of larger than life forest entity. But it seems like it takes the shape of a bear more often than not.
That's gonna get us, I guess, our last question before we head into the unmade adaptations. But if you were to make the film, like, what would it look like? Like, how would you go in line with like something you just described?
Yeah, I would probably have it be just recognizable enough to be recognized as a bear-like creature, but would definitely want it to have something that set it apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is something that, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting his name,
You
Stephen
scared.
Graham Jones.
You literally scared me. I was like, "What is behind her?
Oh
Is
no,
it
my
a lot of
bookshelf is behind me. Sorry, I was looking at my
Oh
bookshelf.
my god! How dare
Stephen
you?
Graham Jones, I think, is good about presenting characters like this too in his books.
Yes, yes.
But just something a little bit off, where you're like, this is not obviously, like, not quite animal. This is something separate. There's something off about this creature. This is not a typical bear. If it's a bear at all, like, this is something bigger than that. This is something otherworldly. So I would definitely like it to have that feeling. So it could never be confused or misconstrued as just a sick bear or something. Like, I would want it to be 100% otherworldly, from somewhere else, something older, something ancient, something
And
unrecognizable.
I would like have to wear her face in a scary way sometimes too, because she's always trying to convince herself to sort of sabotage her
Yeah.
success. So
Yeah.
I love it. I'm spooked even. Would you be okay if maybe we jump into the reason everybody's listening, which is the different iterations of this adaptation that has yet to appear?
Absolutely.
Well, it started off back in like 2004, 2005. So a few years or 5 or so years after this book was published. I believe it's kind of not a lot of like confirmation out there, but it's believed that George A. Romero around this time became attached as director, and it was reported on, could be kind of gossip, that Dakota Fanning and Laura Dern were set to star as Trisha and her mom, Quilla. And before I move on, I just want to ask you what you think about these two possibly in these roles at this time. Like, how do you feel about it?
I think that's good. I think Dakota, even as a young adult, as a young girl, had the range and the emotion. I mean, she was in so many, her
She
and her
was so
sister.
good. Yeah.
They're both incredible child actors and have
Very.
gone on to have obviously very successful careers. But I think that they really had some ways of feeling a little bit older than their years. And I think that's something that Trisha does. Yes, she's 9, but she does present pretty mature for her age, but yet still a child. And I think that Dakota would do that well. And then Laura Dern, I mean, queen, like whatever. She can do no
I
wrong.
agree.
Like, I think she'd be great in this and would have the range to have the frustration with her son and the frustration at the situation, but then also have the emotional depth to really explore that grief and that terror and the guilt of losing her child in the forest and not realizing until it's too late that she's gone. Oof.
And I'm guessing because she was and is such a big name that the mother character would probably have been beefed up considerably.
Yeah.
From what we see in the book. So there probably would have been a lot more outside of the woods stuff, which I think would be good and add to it.
Yeah.
In 2006, so about a year after this, in an interview with Elaine Lampkin at Bloody Disgusting, Romero discussed his involvement with the project. So this is what Romero said to Bloody Disgusting around 2006. Steve and I go way back. He's a great guy, and I wanted to do The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, which is a wonderful story. I've actually already written the adaptation and wanted Dakota Fanning for the lead role. But Hollywood thought the story was too soft, especially with my name attached, so it's on hold for now. But we came very close to doing it, perhaps one day soon. This fucking guy was writing like a machine. He never stopped writing. I just did a mini series on his stuff too, and what we learned is like, he, even though he didn't make a movie for like 8 years, like he wrote like 40 million scripts. And I love that he like pumped out a fucking Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon script. We have to find it.
I know. Has it ever been? I've never heard of it being like released or available.
I don't think so. I had a co-host for Romero Unseen who had been through all of the archives at the University of Pittsburgh, and he had scripts for everything, but he didn't have scripts for that. So I don't think it's out there unless it's like in the like his family's personal collection.
I bet they're holding on to it because, as we're going to talk about in a second, maybe they're keeping it close because what's going to happen, and they don't want to put it out there until like, hey, but there's maybe something we can use here.
Well, that's
that may come into play.
Interesting because it takes 10 years before there's an update, but it's still in the family. Do you want to sort of give us information on that?
Yeah, so it stalls. Nothing happens with it for a long time, but then over a decade later, like you said, 10 years, article comes out and Variety is reporting Stephen King's The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon has been set up as a movie at George A. Romero's Sanibel Films, Vertigo Entertainment, and Origin Story. Okay. So that's where Romero is still involved in this. And then, so Vertigo partners Roy Lee and John Berg are set to produce it. And Roy Lee, that name, maybe you don't know, but you know some of the work that he's produced.
Mhm.
It Chapter 1. You might have heard of that film, highest grossing horror film of all time. Also, Stephen King property, obviously.
Mhm.
He's a producer on that, and also Barbarian. So guys produced some horror bangers. And then let's see, Chris Romero and Ryan Silber, Andrew Childs was set to executive produce, and Chris Romero is the ex-wife of George Romero
Mhm.
and is also a film producer and assistant director. They met on the set of Season of the Witch, not the Nicolas Cage film, you guys.
Imagine. That'd be a weird timeline.
Don't be confused.
Okay.
But I'm sure everybody listening knows that, like, oh my God, please, Rachel, we know. So,
Maybe I know.
and Chris was also an AD on Dawn of the Dead. So Romero's family's still involved. So it wouldn't surprise me if they haven't released that, because they are going to try to hopefully incorporate some of Romero's original ideas into whatever the project ends up being, is my thought.
Mhm.
King, of course, loved Romero. They go way back. They've worked together on a lot of other things. And so, of course, I feel like King would be all game to have Romero involved in this. He said in a statement, "I'm thrilled that my book is being brought to the screen and that George's company is involved. Chris Forrest, aka Romero, has worked long and hard to make this project happen." So I think this would be like he would sign on the dotted line immediately without really thinking about it, as long as Romero was involved in some way.
Mhm.
And then Ryan Silbert, who we talked about, he said about this, he said, "We are thrilled to join forces with the team at Vertigo on the adaptation of The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, a story that is so close to our hearts. We cannot wait for fans to experience Trisha's journey on the big screen as we adapt Stephen King's visionary and timeless novel to a new medium."
Whoa. You know, it's so funny when you were giving that statement by Stephen King, because I feel like that's what he says every time. Like, I feel like
I know.
every time he's like, "I'm just happy they're making it."
Yeah, it is. I feel like there's a few projects that he's very picky about, some stories that are incredibly personal to him. Like we've talked about, like The Dark Tower being one of them, obviously. Like that is his magnum opus. That is, especially after his accident, I feel like that was something nagging at the back. Like, I have to finish this. Like, I cannot leave this hanging. This is my legacy. And then there's some books, like, they may be special in some ways, but yeah, he's gonna, like, whatever. Like, did they pay me?
Take
you know,
it.
and not that he cares about the money, but also like, yeah, sure. But I do think that Romero is, and his company and his family and anybody involved with Romero, I do think that that was a special relationship to him. So I think it's not necessarily the subject matter that he wanted to produce. You know, it wasn't The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon itself, maybe, that he was thrilled, you know, about being brought to the screen, but the fact that, you know, George's company is involved, like, that makes me happy. Like, I'm happy to have them behind it.
I love them. They are the cutest little team in the world. And I just remember learning that, like, Romero was supposed to fucking adapt all of them. Like, he was attached to every fucking Stephen King movie at one point or another. And at the end of the day, only really ever ended up adapting one, and then also did Creepshow. And I think it was the Dark Half.
Yeah.
So, like, he never really... Hollywood is just such a little piece of shit, you know?
Yeah.
But that's kind of the thesis of this whole podcast.
Touche.
So yeah, it was around then, maybe even a year later, in November of 2020, when Hollywood Reporter announced that director Lynne Ramsay had been attached to direct The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. This was, I think, just before she released You Were Never Really Here. I think that's around the timeline. And she's also known for We Need to Talk About Kevin, too, another, like, fairly renowned thriller drama. Ramsay had already a script with co-writer Christy Hall, who people probably knew best from co-creating the TV series I Am Not Okay With This on Netflix, which I never watched, but I know starred that young actress from It. I forget her name. Can you help me out?
Yeah, you're right. I forgot her name too.
Whatever, it's fine. Yeah, she's in that. Did you ever watch that?
I did not watch. Wait, I didn't watch that. I watched. She was in something similar around the same time that I watched.
Interesting. She's so good. Oh, she was in Sharp Objects, for one thing.
Oh, okay.
Which is, like, one of my favorites. I haven't read the book, but that miniseries really is, like,
dark.
Have you seen it?
I've seen
Oh,
enough of
it's
it.
good. Yeah, it's dark as shit, but it also feels very like gay iconic, if that makes sense.
Yes,
Does
it
that make
does.
sense?
Yeah.
My favorite actress of all time being Patricia Clarkson. That is not a joke. So, okay, what am I talking about? So yeah, those are the two that were going to make it around this time. And it was announced that it was even expected to shoot in 2021, which is a pretty cursed year if we think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then nothing has been announced since, well, like 2020, at the end of 2020, let's say 2021. But that's a long time ago now. Do you remember when 2021 wasn't that long ago? Well, that's not the
Yeah.
case anymore.
I know.
Yeah. Now it's like, wait, it's 2027. Oh my God. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Anyway, gotta have think COVID played a role in this. Um,
Yeah, there's so
Not a
many
good time.
things. No, I
Yeah.
mean, there's COVID, and
That's
then
right.
I feel like the whole landscape of films and streaming and TV, like everything, I feel like shifted, and then we had the strikes, and so I feel like it's a very tumultuous time in so many ways, and who knows, any number of things that could have just like shelved this temporarily. Not just COVID. I feel like,
Or permanent.
don't say
Oh
that.
my God, you're right.
No,
I'm the god of the lost. Oh my God, I am
you're
with the
feeding off our fear.
yeah. No, as the host of this podcast. But yeah, both. Okay. What do we think about Ramsay as a creative? Have you seen which of her films have you seen?
I have seen You Were Never Really Here, and We Need to Talk About Kevin.
Okay.
I think that's
all I
it.
can think of too. These
Yeah.
may be her only movies.
No, she's done more, but
Okay.
I think they were a little like less horror adjacent, so I wasn't quite as interested.
I see. Well, okay, like listen, we need to talk about Kevin is like very scary. It's a really scary movie.
It's
I think.
brutal. I think
Yeah.
it's brutal. It's definitely one of those films that I love that I don't want to watch again.
Oh, definitely not.
You know what I mean? Like it's like that's enough, and I love it, and I think it was handled so well, and I think the performances are great. Also, with what we know now, with some of the actors, like it does carry a different weight. I feel
Mhm.
like so it's harder to want to revisit, and obviously the subject matter is really difficult. But I love her ability to handle some of those really dark, complicated subject matters and present these really complicated characters who aren't really likable necessarily, but we're still invested and intrigued by and
Mhm.
can still empathize with on some, on some level. Like you think of Tilda Swinton and We Need to Talk About Kevin, and you feel for her in some ways, but she's also not super great
No,
either.
she's a mess for sure. Okay,
She's
for
a
like the three people that don't know, like what's this movie's logline?
I mean, it's about the mom of a school shooter. That's very boiled down. There's a lot of complex, and it's her just reflecting on her relationship with her son and her life, and you kind of see this situation unfold through her eyes and her experiences. And it's a lot of flip-flopping in timeline, a lot of mixed timelines, but it eventually does all come together, and it's just ugh, a
It's a
punch to the
lot.
gut.
I don't know if I honestly feel like it was actually like in some ways it's a very successful movie and in other ways I wasn't totally sure that it was, but what it was frightening and it was well made and it was beautiful. So like in terms of the direction, really like an exciting talent to be working with. The other film that you mentioned, You Were Never Really Here. Can we talk about that like real quick? What's that about?
Yeah, similarly, like Dark Material, it's about this killer. I don't know what you want to call him, a contract killer, an assassin for hire, killer for hire, and he kind of comes across this sort of conspiracy situation while he's trying to get this girl out of like a sex trafficking kind of situation,
Mm.
and similarly, a very strong lead that is complicated, Joaquin Phoenix, but it's just incredibly brutal at moments, and but also kind of slow and very atmospheric and very moody, and you get in the head of his character and this world so interestingly, and I love her ability to build tension in such an uncomfortable way.
Totally. Yes.
And I think that's something that both of these films really demonstrate well.
She kind of sometimes feels like kind of like Gus Van Sant gives me those kind of similar feelings sometimes, like
Mhm.
a quiet dread. Do you think this was the right choice for Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon?
I actually love this choice
Mm.
because I do think that she has a way of being dark and
Mhm.
has a way of really playing up situations that on paper might not seem that terrifying, but it's really how she frames it and presents it and the pacing, and she's got very strong visuals, and I always feel like she's very in control of her vision and the style and the colors, and everything seems very thought out. And I think that that would be so beautiful in a very broad, a wood setting. Like, I think that would be such an interesting thing to really see from her, because I haven't, and admittedly, I haven't seen everything that she's done.
Mhm.
And I do think that she handles some, like with, we need to talk about Kevin, that timeline stuff and that back and forth. And I do think that's something that this story has. Obviously, a lot of the times we're with Trisha, but sometimes we're with Trisha having a flashback in her head, thinking about something that happened with, her dad or Pepsi or whoever, these other situations. And then we've got her sort of her dreams or her hallucinations. And then
Yeah.
sometimes we're with her family and what they're experiencing and what's going on out in the real world that's searching for her. And I feel
Mhm.
like that's could be messy in the wrong hands and could be confusing in the wrong hands. But I think that Ramsay would handle that really beautifully. And even though this is a YA story, I think she could really give it some heft and some depth to elevate it. I mean, the book I do feel like is elevated in a lot of ways. It's great for YA, but it doesn't feel like it's talking down to the audience.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's something that she could really elevate as well.
I agree with everything you said. Like, I do think she's the perfect choice for this. Um, yeah, she like manages horror in a very subtle, sometimes like beautiful way, and I think that is really important for this. And I think even like on a less complicated level, um, there have been very few Stephen King adaptations helmed by women, and this is like
Yes.
a really important one for that to sort of be sort of from a woman's POV. One of my favorite things I've ever written at Dread Central is I compiled a list of every Stephen King adaptation directed by a woman, and there was only two. In basically, for like if you're being conservative, there's only two proper theatrical adaptations by women, and it's can you guess?
Well,
Oh,
Pet
here we go.
Cemetery
Of course.
and Pet Cemetery 2, loosely.
Well, I wish we could include it.
Yeah.
Um, and the Carrie remake from 2013,
That
Kimberly
is so
Pierce.
depressing
It's
because, like,
rough.
he has so many incredible, I mean, he's got some female, characters that aren't so
Yep,
great, but he has
of
so
course.
many
Yep.
incredible female characters.
Many, many,
Oh,
many, many.
yeah, that's sad.
Um, there was like some TV shows helmed by women and stuff like that, but yeah, we gotta get more in the fold. And what a perfect way to sort of continue that would be for this. So
And
I think
somebody is
one.
like acclaimed too, I feel like Lynne Ramsay, I think her screenplay, it won Cannes for You Were Never Really Here, I think.
Oh wow.
And so, she's definitely kind of a tour level filmmaker, I feel like, who's very picky about her projects. She hasn't done a ton of things, but when she
Yep.
drops something, it does make me want to watch some of her older work, because whenever she drops something, it seems like, oh, this is good. And so the fact that she's so drawn to this story, like, I want to see that. Like, please. She's not
Yeah.
just a for hire. Like, she co-wrote this script. Clearly, she's invested and clearly is attracted to this project. So I'm
Mhm.
all in. Like, give it to me. I want to see that.
I mean, honestly, we'd be lucky. Like, I feel like one of the worst case scenarios, but it's very possible, is that like she could have a project she's more excited about than this,
Yes.
potentially, especially if it's she wrote it herself or who knows. But yeah, so hopefully she still really wants to make this. Do you think it will happen? Is my question.
I think it will. I'm saying that because I want to manifest it. I want to put that out into the universe. Like, I don't want to give up and have the the God of the Lost eat my soul
Oh,
and my hope for I do. This is a project. There's so many Stephen King things that we hear about. We roll our eyes because we're like, oh God, are you kidding me? Like, why? Or, there's certain projects that are a little disappointing or whatever. So when there's something like this that seems, it's a little less known of a project, but the director is like really fascinating. It's exciting. So yes, it will happen because I have to believe that it'll happen.
Do you think I could change my stage name to the God of the Lost, and that's okay?
Please do, yes.
Okay, can I do it? Like, can it be like a podcast by the God of the Lost? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Are you okay with that? Okay,
Yes, I love it.
Then it's me, like, this is what the God of the Lost looks like. That'd be crazy. I've been looking at myself this entire time because my hair is very academic today. Would you agree with that?
I love it. I like imagining you now, like out in the forest, just like somebody's like, like stalking. They're like stumbling across a swamp, starving and dehydrated, and you're just there in the background,
just like smoking a ciggy, and
you're just like, hi.
Yeah. That's very funny to me. Okay, Rachel, where can we be found on the internet if that's something you're okay with happening?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at the Vinyl Girl, GRRRL, or Twitter at Vinyl Girl, also on Blue Sky and I don't know, Threads. I'm on all the things. Same handle.
Thank you so much for listening to Development Hell. If you enjoy this podcast, then please do us a major favor of leaving us 5 stars and writing a positive review. It really makes all the difference in the world. We'll see you next week with a brand new episode of Development Hell.
Thank you for listening to the Dread Podcast Network.